All right, so get ready because today we are really going deep on a topic that may raise some eyebrows.
Oh, yeah.
It's the, shall we say, Cougar.
Interesting.
And we will be looking at some excerpts from a podcast called Text to Calais.
Okay.
And they had like a whole episode about how to spot these women.
Mm-hmm.
Now, look, we're not saying that we endorse their perspective at all. We're
Yeah.
just using it as like a lens.
Sure, a framework.
Yeah, just a framework
Yeah.
to kind of explore this topic, don't you think?
I think it's a great idea,
Yeah.
especially because cougar, is kind of a loaded term.
Right.
It means different things to different people. So how do you even define it?
Well, Text Calais actually tries to do just that.
Okay.
They describe a cougar as a woman who is interested in dating significantly younger men,
Okay.
which kind of makes sense, right?
I mean, on the surface, yeah. But what does significantly younger even mean?
Exactly.
That's the thing. Like, how much younger are we talking?
Right.
I mean, is it 5 years, 10 years, 20 years?
Right.
Like, where's the cutoff?
I think that's where it gets really interesting, right?
Yeah, totally.
Because it's not really about a number.
No.
It's more about all of these perceptions and stereotypes we have about these women.
Exactly.
So speaking of stereotypes, let's break down some of the ones that Text Calais brought up.
Okay.
They had a whole list of like 7 characteristics of a cougar, and some are pretty spot on, I think.
Okay. I'm curious.
So like one of them was having a sophisticated yet edgy fashion sense.
Right.
So basically having a strong personal style.
Okay.
And then another one was financial independence,
Right.
which of course, can be really threatening for some people.
Yeah, especially because it challenges those traditional gender roles.
For sure.
Like the idea that a woman needs a man to support her.
Right.
And that can be very appealing to some people, but also very threatening to others.
Mm-hmm.
Depends on where they fall on that spectrum.
Definitely. And then they also talk about having an active social life, but not just like the typical bar scene,
Yeah.
It's more like networking hobbies, and they even mention unconventional or edgy activities.
Uh-huh.
So it's almost like they're painting this picture of a woman who's always evolving and not afraid to push boundaries.
Right. And that in itself can be like a whole other conversation.
Absolutely.
It's like society expects women to hit a certain age and then slow down.
Yeah.
But the cougar stereotype kind of flips that on its head.
Right.
It's like, hey, life doesn't end at 40 or 50. You can still have fun, be adventurous, live life on your own terms.
Totally. And speaking of terms,
Yeah.
the source also points out that a key cougar characteristic is direct and honest communication.
Okay.
They talk about these women being comfortable expressing their opinions and having a playful sense of humor.
This is interesting
Right.
because it's like we have all these expectations about how women should communicate.
Uh-huh.
And directness and assertiveness, especially in women, can be seen as, too aggressive or too masculine. So it really all boils down to perception and cultural norms,
It's amazing how each of these characteristics can be interpreted in totally different ways. I
Exactly.
mean, it just shows you how complex this whole cougar concept really is.
It does. It makes you think about,
Yeah.
what does this whole phenomenon even reveal
Right.
about our anxieties, about aging gender roles, and even like power dynamics.
Totally. And that leads us perfectly into our next big question, which is,
Yeah.
how do cougars approach relationships?
Oh, this is juicy.
Right. Well, Text Calais suggests that they prefer relationships with fewer expectations and commitments,
Oh, okay.
and that they may even be seeking casual or purely physical connections.
What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, on the surface, it sounds like it just plays into that whole stereotype of the predatory cougar, right?
Oh, yeah, totally. Like the older woman who's just out for a good time.
Exactly.
But maybe there's more to it than that.
You think so?
I don't know. It makes me think about the fact that more and more women, especially older women, are wanting more autonomy in their relationships.
Yeah.
Like for so long, society told women, find a man, get married, have kids, settle down.
Uh-huh.
But that story is changing.
Right.
And I think the cougar phenomenon, even with its issues, shows that women want to break free from those expectations.
So it's not just about older women dating younger men.
Right.
It's about women wanting to decide how they want to live their lives.
Exactly. It's about agency and redefining what it means to be a woman in a society that often tries to put you in a box based on your age.
I see what you're saying, and that kind of ties back to what Tex Colley was saying about fewer expectations and commitments.
Yeah.
I mean, at first it sounds like they're just trying to avoid relationships altogether.
Yeah, the carefree older woman who's not looking for anything serious.
And maybe it's not that simple.
Right, like what if it's actually about taking control? After years of, societal pressures and expectations, Maybe they're looking for connections that feel more authentic.
Right.
Connections that aren't defined by those traditional roles.
That's a really good point.
It challenges the idea that all women want the same thing out of a relationship, regardless of age.
And it kind of flips the script on the whole idea that women lose their value as they get older.
Totally.
It's like they're saying, I'm not going to let society tell me how to live or who to love.
Right. It's about defining your own happiness.
But what about the red flags that Text Call brought up? Like the problems that can come from big age gaps.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they do say that those relationships can be tricky, right?
Oh, for sure. I mean, age gaps can definitely lead to differences, like different priorities, different life experiences, and even different ways of communicating.
Right.
Those are all valid concerns.
But as they point out, age gaps aren't bad in and of themselves.
Exactly.
It really comes down to the two people involved and how compatible they are.
Right. It's about mutual respect, shared values, and the ability to work through those challenges that come up in any relationship.
No matter what the age difference is.
Exactly.
So how do we make sense of all of this?
Right.
On the one hand, we have this potential for empowerment and breaking free from societal norms. But on the other hand, we have all these stereotypes and potential problems.
Yeah, it's a lot to think about.
It really is.
I think it all comes back to that question we talked about earlier.
Which one?
Do labels like Cougar actually help us understand relationships better?
Or do they make things more confusing?
Yeah, I'm starting to think it's not a simple answer.
Me too.
Like, labels can be helpful for understanding complicated ideas, but they can also be really limiting.
Right.
And in this case, I think the label Cougar might actually hide more than it reveals.
Yeah, it's loaded with so much baggage.
Exactly.
And it often turns real people into caricatures.
Totally. So if we get rid of the label, what are we left with?
Right, what's the real lesson here?
Yeah. What does this whole Cougar phenomenon tell us about ourselves and how relationships are changing?
That's a great question to think about.
I think it's a really important one.
I don't know. It's like Text Call is trying to create this like step-by-step guide to being a cougar.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's like check, check, check. Confident, independent, financially secure, active social life.
Like a recipe.
Yeah. And what do you think about that?
Well, it's kind of weird, right? Like they're just giving you a checklist for attracting younger men.
Right.
But I guess it kind of shows why people are so fascinated by this whole cougar thing.
Yeah.
Like it really brings up a lot of anxieties about aging and gender roles and power dynamics.
For sure.
And it's not just women who feel that way.
Right. Men too.
Absolutely.
But it makes me wonder, is this a new thing?
Yeah.
Or has this always been happening and we're just talking about it more now?
That's a really good question. And it kind of makes you think, like, where did this term even come from?
Right.
Like cougar, it didn't just appear out of thin air. It reflects like real changes in society and how we think about relationships.
Yeah.
I mean, for decades, women were told that they had to find a husband and start a family as soon as possible.
Right.
But things are different now.
Definitely.
And I think the cougar phenomenon, even though it has its problems, shows that women want something different.
So you're saying it's not just about older women dating younger men.
No, it's bigger than that.
It's about challenging the timeline that society has created for women.
Exact.
And that kind of ties back into what Text Call was saying about fewer expectations and commitments.
Yeah.
I mean, at first glance, it seems like they're just trying to avoid serious relationships.
Right. Like they just want to have fun.
But maybe it's about something deeper.
Maybe.
Like, what if it's about women taking control of their lives?
Yeah. After years of doing what they're supposed to do, maybe they're finally ready to do what they want.
And that includes choosing relationships that feel right for them.
Exactly.
Relationships that aren't based on those old traditional roles.
Right. And it challenges that idea that women become less valuable as they age.
Totally. It's like they're saying, I'm not going to let society tell me what I'm worth.
And I'm going to define my own happiness.
But what about those red flags that Text Call mentioned?
The what?
The red flags, like the problems that can come from big age gaps.
Oh, yeah, of course. Age gaps can definitely create some challenges. Like you might have different priorities or different life experiences or even different ways of communicating.
Right.
Those are all things to consider.
But as Tex Cully pointed out, age gaps aren't necessarily bad.
Right. It really depends on the couple.
And how well they connect with each other.
Exactly. It's about mutual respect and shared values and being able to work through those challenges that come up in any relationship.
So age isn't really the deciding factor.
Nope.
It's more about the people involved.
Exactly.
So where does that leave us? On one hand, we have this potential for empowerment and breaking free from those old rules.
Mhm.
But then on the other hand, we have all these stereotypes and potential problems.
It's complicated, right?
It really is.
It makes me think about that question we talked about earlier.
You mean about labels?
Yeah, like, do labels like Cougar actually help us understand relationships?
Or do they make things even more confusing?
Right. I'm starting to think that labels can be helpful,
Yeah.
but they can also be really limiting.
Uh-huh.
And in this case, I think the label Cougar might be hiding more than it reveals.
It's like it's loaded with all this baggage.
Exactly.
And it often reduces complex people to simple stereotypes.
Yeah. So if we take away the label, what are we left with?
That's the question, isn't it?
It is. What's the real takeaway here?
What does the cougar phenomenon tell us about ourselves and how relationships are changing?
That's something to think about.
It feels like we've talked a lot about cougars, but we're missing like a big piece of the puzzle.
What's that?
What about the guys?
Oh, yeah, the younger men.
Right? Like, what's their deal?
It's interesting that Text Call didn't really talk about them much.
Yeah, they kind of just focused on the women.
Almost like the men's reasons are obvious or something.
But I don't think it's that simple.
Me neither.
Why do you think younger guys are attracted to older women?
Well, Text Call A did mention experience and maturity.
Which makes sense.
Yeah, experience can be really attractive.
It definitely shapes who you are and how you see the world.
And how you connect with people.
But I also think there's like a societal thing going on.
Oh, yeah.
Like, we live in a world that tells us younger is better, especially for women.
Right. So if a younger guy chooses to date an older woman, he's kind of going against that.
Like, he's saying, I don't care about those superficial things.
Exactly.
I want something more.
And that something more could be a lot of things,
Mm-hmm.
like confidence or intelligence or emotional maturity.
A different way of looking at life.
Right. It's about recognizing that attraction isn't just about looks or age.
I bet it's also exciting to date someone outside your usual circle.
Oh, for sure.
Like trying something new and different.
Yeah, but let's not make assumptions. Just like we shouldn't assume all older women are just looking for fun.
We shouldn't assume all younger men are just looking for something exotic. So it's not just about age.
No, it's about the individuals and what they're looking for.
I guess the motivations are just as complicated as the people involved.
Exactly. And I think that's an important thing to remember as we wrap up this conversation about cougars.
So what have we learned today?
Well, we started by looking at how Text Call A tried to define what a cougar is.
And we saw that it's not so easy.
No, it's full of stereotypes and anxieties.
But we also saw that these relationships can be empowering.
Yeah, they challenge those old expectations.
And we even talked about the younger men and why they might be attracted to older women.
It's fascinating to me that no matter how you feel about the word cougar, this whole conversation tells us a lot about how society is changing.
Yeah, like we're moving away from those strict rules.
And towards more individual choice and freedom in relationships.
I think that's the biggest takeaway from all of this.
The cougar phenomenon, even with all its complications, makes us think about age and gender roles and what relationships can look like in the 21st century.
We've barely scratched the surface, though.
No, we haven't. This conversation is going to keep evolving.
As society changes and new relationship styles emerge.
That's what makes it so interesting.
And to all our listeners out there, we want to hear from you.
Yeah. What do you think about cougars?
Do you like the term, or does it feel outdated?
Maybe even offensive.
Tell us what you think on social media or email us.
We always love hearing from you.
Until next time, keep those deep dives going.